we've talked about what you said before about the temperature going down, but Secretary Austin also spoke about this and said that the sense was that the temperature was going down in the Middle East. So can you say to what extent this
doesn't help.
Was a surprise? Like, was
These
the U.S.
reports these reports over the last 48 hours certainly don't help with the temperature going down. I'm not going to be Pollyannish about it. We're obviously concerned about escalation. And again, without confirming the reports over the last 24 in terms of Tehran, certainly the IDF has already spoken to operations that they've conducted elsewhere. All of this adds to the complicated nature of what we're trying to get done. And what we're trying to get done is a ceasefire deal that can get you 6 weeks in phase one, get a lot of hostages, the most at-risk, out of there and home with their families, and get some more humanitarian assistance in there. I know I keep coming back to that, but it's important that we do keep coming back to that, because that's what we're really trying to drive at. And if we can get to phase one, by God, we can maybe get to phase two. And if you can get to phase two, maybe you can get a cessation of hostilities. When you have events, dramatic events, violent events, caused by whatever actors, it certainly doesn't make the task of achieving that outcome any easier.
But, who is Israel supposed to negotiate with if the leader of Hamas is dead?
Again, I can't confirm the reports coming out of Tehran or Hamas's statements. We still believe there's a viable process. We still believe there's interested counterparts. And we still believe that there are meetings and discussions to be had. We wouldn't have a team over there right now if we didn't believe that it was possible to try to gather together and push this forward.
Okay, thank you. Follow up on her question. What is the U.S. strategy for Venezuela if Maduro still be considered a winner? Is the U.S. planning to impose more sanctions, or?
It's a terrific hypothetical question that I'm not going to answer. I would simply say that we'll reserve our rights and our abilities in terms of consequences one way or another based on what we see coming out of the electoral authorities in Venezuela. It's in their interest, too, to be fully transparent and credible about what happened on Sunday. So we'll see where this goes.
If he considered to be the winner, what the U.S. planning to do?
Let's see the results. Let's see the results.
Good, Andrew, and then we got John.
Two questions for you. You said there's a team in the region from the U.S. You've said there are interested counterparts to speak to. Who are they, and why would they show up to these talks, given that the guy who was heading the talks for Hamas is now dead? What reason do they have to poke their heads up above ground? And then I have a second one.
As I also said, it's too soon to know what these reports are going to mean for the ceasefire deal. What we do know is we have a team in the region. What we do know is we want to keep having these conversations, and we believe they're still worth having. We also haven't seen any indications at 2:07 on Wednesday afternoon here, the 31st of July, that the process has been completely torpedoed and it ain't worth pursuing. So we're going to keep pursuing it.
On the process being torpedoed completely or otherwise, my colleagues and I have spoken to family members of hostages who are still being held, and the view among many of them is that Netanyahu and his government do not want to deal, and Netanyahu in particular does not want to deal because if there is a deal and the war ends, his government collapses and he possibly continues on trial for corruption and goes to prison. Does the president still believe that the prime minister is acting in good faith here?
Based on the constructive conversations that we had with the prime minister last week, we still believe that this is a worthy endeavor. We still believe that the gaps can be narrowed, the details can be fleshed out, and a deal can be had. Now again, it's too soon to know what these recent events over the last 24, 48 hours are going to do to the process. I don't want to sound overly sanguine here, but we still believe the deal on the table is worth pursuing, and the hostages need to come home, and we're not going to stop trying to work on that.
Those conversations, all of them took place before the events of the last few days. Is the president open to changing his view based on what has happened?
I mean, I've never known President Biden to ever not be willing to look at things with a fresh set of eyes. And as I said earlier, it's just too soon to know. with the reports coming out of the region, what kind of impact there's going to be on the ceasefire deal. What I can tell you he hasn't changed his mind on is that we want to get the deal, that we want to pursue it, that the deal on the table is a good one. Both sides ought to accept it. They ought to sit down in earnest and hash through these details that have to be fleshed out and close the gaps that we believe can be closed, and let's move forward. Let's get phase one in place. He hasn't changed his mind on that, not at all.